In the depths of Woolberry Forest, the trees stood tall and thick, their leaves forming a dense canopy that allowed only streaks of light to touch the grassy floor. At the heart of the forest, a young woman sat calmly on a grand chair, surrounded by her loyal subordinates. Before them knelt the remnants of a broken team, their members scattered in defeat, leaving only one man barely conscious, slumped on the ground. The girl remained composed, watching the scene unfold, while the man beside her leaned in and asked if, after all this effort, he still hadn't appeared. Then what should they do now? She thought for a moment, her eyes cold, and gave a simple order. Kill him. Without hesitation, one of her men raised a heavy axe high above the lone survivor, and began to bring it down. The man clenched his teeth, bracing for death, but before the axe could strike, a blur of black and silver swept through the clearing. A boy with white hair and a flowing black cloak dashed in, his sword clashing against the axe midair, sending it flying. The stunned man on the ground looked up in disbelief and shouted with joy, "Jae-hyun, you're here!" But their enemies weren't celebrating. Panic rose in their voices as someone yelled his name. "It's Hirkin! If we rush him together, we can bring him down!" But they underestimated the storm they had just awakened. Hirkin moved like lightning, slicing through the air, his blade catching neck after neck before the enemy could react. Bodies dropped as he tore through their ranks with terrifying speed. Then he paused, his sword dripping with blood, and looked at the survivors. "You think coming at me all at once will change anything? You guys can't beat me." He was Hirkin. Real name, Jae-hyun. Affiliation, Hada Mask. Nickname, Hero Slayer. Hirkin's teammate clenched his teeth, his voice heavy with guilt as he said that he was sorry, that everything had gone wrong because of them. They never expected those bastards to be lying in ambush like this. But Hirkin turned to him calmly and asked what he was apologizing for. With a faint smile, he sheathed his sword behind his back and extended a hand. He said he was fine and told him to get up. The man took his hand, eyes welling with tears, and sobbed that Hirkin Jae-hyun was truly incredible. Hirkin chuckled and said that, really, none of this was even their fault. He blamed it on the pathetic loser who was always lagging behind because she lacked the skill. Then he turned with a smirk and added, "Right, dumbass." The girl smiled bitterly, but her eyes were seething with anger. She said what a touching friendship it was, asking why they were acting so sentimental when even threads bent together wouldn't change anything. Her voice was sharp and cold. She was Sir, real name Chai Seal-yin. Affiliation, Thunder Hunter. Nickname, Queen of Thunder. Hirkin smirked and asked who was the one always clenching her teeth and charging in, only to get wrecked by Thresh again. Sir snapped back, warning him to watch his mouth and not cry about it later with regret. But Hirkin only raised his arm. On his wrist was a strange band with a circular dial embedded in the center. As he twisted the circle, a sharp clicking sound echoed. In a flash, his entire appearance transformed. Black armor enveloped him from head to toe, his sword now gleamed with a deadly upgrade, and a mask covered his face. This was no longer just Hirkin. This was the Hero Slayer, ready for war. Hirkin smiled faintly and said that was something only weaklings like her would feel. Rage surged through Sir as her eyes flared with fury. She clenched her fists and shouted with venom, "You arrogant bastard, kill him!" But Hirkin only laughed, his voice echoing through the tense forest. "Kill me? Will you ever learn? You'll never be able to kill me." Then, without warning, everything changed. A sharp pain struck him from behind. The cold bite of steel pierced through his back and tore out from his chest. Hirkin's smile faded. "What the?" His voice trembled as he looked down at the blood now dripping from the blade. He turned his head slowly and saw one of his own teammates standing behind him, their swords still buried in his body. Blood bubbled at his lips, and a system notification flashed before his eyes, warning him that his HP was dropping rapidly. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, and asked, "What's the meaning of this?" His teammate looked away and muttered, "Sorry for deceiving you, Hirkin. We all need to make a living. Don't hate me for this." Hirkin's voice cracked as he asked, What have you done?" Sir's laughter erupted through the clearing. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched her stomach, laughing like she'd lost her mind. She said, "Wow, how stupid could he be? Getting caught up in some pathetic friendship fantasy as if that ever mattered more than money." She leaned in close, her voice dripping with mockery. "I'm going to erase you from this game. Every time you log in, I'll kill you again. And again. Until you can't make any progress at all." You're a full-time warlord gamer, aren't you? Didn't you say you were a worthless piece of trash with nothing going for you except this game? Well, too bad for you. She laughed again and whispered, You're back to being trash. Hyrkan's hand clawed into the mud as he tried to stand, his body trembling with fury and pain. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm, shouting for her to shut her mouth. But before he could rise, more blades pierced through him one after another from every direction. His own teammates drove their weapons into him, sealing his fate. Sir stood tall and smirked. She looked around and said, Thank you, everyone. Hyrkan couldn't even breathe anymore. His body was limp, and his words came out broken and trembling. He looked at the people he once called comrades and whispered, You guys, why? You know how much I gave for our guild. One of them scoffed and said coldly, Just die already, Hyrkan. They are offering us hundreds of millions just to kill you. What did you think we'd do? His eyes widened in disbelief. Hyrkan couldn't speak anymore. Inside his mind, he screamed. Just because of money? Do you even understand how much I sacrificed for all of you? Didn't you say we were family? Damn it. Damn it. Then, a cold chime echoed in his ears. The system notification popped up and read, You have died. Penalty, cannot log in for 48 hours. Back in the real world, Jaehyun ripped off his VR helmet, gasping for air. He clutched his head and shouted with all the pain bottled inside him. I lost. I lost everything in the game. Warlord, the game that took over the world in 2035, was more than just a phenomenon. It was a revolution. An AI-driven virtual reality that raked in unimaginable wealth and captivated millions. But for Jaehyun, it was more than a game. It was the only thing he had ever been good at. In the real world, people called him trash. He was ignored, overlooked, cast aside. But in Warlord, he belonged. That world was the only place where he mattered. Or so he believed. He clenched his teeth, grief and rage tightening in his chest. He had forgiven them once. But now, all he wanted was revenge. He was going to find every one of them and kill them. With tears burning in his eyes, he grabbed his jacket, slipped on his worn slippers, and ran outside, his mind spiraling. He tried calling Eunsu, the one who had betrayed him, his fingers trembling. What the hell did I do all that for? He thought. What was the point of all that pain and effort? Just so those bastards could live their lives peacefully without me? He was so lost in his thoughts, he didn't even notice the traffic light was red. His feet crossed the road blindly. And then he saw it. A massive truck bearing down on him. He didn't move. His eyes widened, and hot tears spilled down his cheeks. If only I'd known it would all end like this. I would have never cared about anyone else. The truck slammed into him. The sound of impact echoed. Blood splattered across the road. Jaehyun's body lay twisted and broken. His phone, lying beside him, blinked with the last call attempt. The robotic voice said, The number you have dialed is unavailable. Please try again later. He gasped for air, his heartbeat fading. And even then, he thought, of all things, I had to get hit by a garbage truck. I can't die now. That traitor. That bastard who stabbed me in the back. I have to get revenge. His body trembled one last time as he clenched his jaw. His eyes stayed open. His breath stopped. Darkness consumed everything. But then, there was a shine in the middle. The loading sign appeared saying, Connecting. A calm voice followed, User verification in process. Welcome, User Hyrkan. Complete the tutorial. Survive against the Labyrinth Master Minotaur. Hyrkan's eyes snapped open. He was suddenly inside the game Warlord, sitting on the stone ground. Everything around him felt too real. In front of him stood a massive beast, the Minotaur, towering like a nightmare. Its eyes burned red, its nostrils flaring as it growled and charged through the arena. Bodies of players lay across the floor, blood soaking the stones. Hyrkan tried to understand what was happening. He thought, Is this Warlord? The tutorial was removed, wasn't it? What the hell is going on? Two players, the only ones still standing, shouted at him. One of them barked out, Hey newbie, stop spacing out and pull yourself together. You saw the alert, didn't you? We have to take that thing down. The Minotaur roared again, shaking the very walls with its fury. The second player glanced at Hyrkan and shouted, Looks like it's impossible to beat that monster alone. All three of us have to attack it together. Tank it for a bit. Herkin, still stunned, managed to ask, "Wasn't the tutorial boss Minotaur removed 5 years ago because it was too difficult?" The man said, 5 years ago? Warlord was released only 10 months ago. What are you talking about? Herkin grasped the situation, murmuring to himself, 10 months ago. Oh, I see. It's only been 10 months. The man looked at him, confused, and said, "What's wrong with this guy? In any case, get it together. When I give the signal, you go out." But before he could finish, Herkin was already moving. He stood up and calmly walked past the man, heading straight toward the beast. The man behind shouted, "What are you doing? Are you crazy?" But Herkin didn't look back. He tightened his grip on the sword and picked up speed. In seconds, he was sprinting toward the Minotaur. The monster bent forward, preparing to strike, but Herkin's eyes lit up with deadly focus. In one swift burst, he slashed through the beast at lightning speed, his movements too fast for the eye to follow. Blood sprayed in the air as the Minotaur's body collapsed, chopped into pieces. The man watched in disbelief and said, "Did he just take down that monster in a single blow?" Both of them smirked and approached Herkin, impressed. His face and hands were drenched in the monster's blood. The man said, "Hey, you've got some serious talent. I don't usually say this, but do you want to join our guild?" That simple question echoed in Herkin's head, triggering the memory of betrayal. His eyes darkened and anger surged through him. He stood there, silent for a moment, then muttered, "I made a decision a while ago." The man smiled, curious, and asked, "A decision? What decision?" Without a word, Herkin swung his sword and cut both men down. Their blood spilled across the floor and stained his blade. Clenching his teeth, Herkin said, "If I trust people again in this life, I will be a dog. The hero slaughterer Herkin has regressed." Herkin woke up in the real world, gasping as he yanked off the V-Gear helmet. He was inside a store, specifically a V-Gear showroom. Looking around, the fluorescent lights, the demo pods, the crowd, it all hit him. He thought, 5 years ago I was broke and couldn't even afford my own gear. I used to play on showroom units like this. Did I actually regress? His eyes widened. If I really have returned to the past, then I've got things to do. Without wasting another second, he pushed through the crowd and ran straight toward the store counter, determined. While running, he clenched his teeth, thinking, "I've got 5 years' worth of future knowledge and experience. If I use it properly, I can take revenge." He reached the counter and leaned in, nearly breathless, asking for the base model V-Gear. The girl behind the counter looked surprised at his urgency, but calmly responded that she'd help him right away. Herkin handed over his card, panting from the run. But the girl checked it and said, "Sir, you don't have enough funds." Herkin froze. "Right. I'm broke. If I had the money, I would have bought one already. Why else would I have been playing on the showroom model?" He clutched his head, frustration bubbling inside. "What should I do? Even if I try to earn money, it'll be too late by the time I get anywhere." Just then, a massive screen in the store came to life, playing a commercial. A deep voice echoed through the store saying, "What are you waiting for? The strong never fear a challenge. Hesitation is a luxury you cannot afford in battle. Become an overlord of war." The ad showed intense scenes of Warlord, ending with a highlight of the current #1 player Queen of Thunder, Sir. Her figure appeared on screen, calm, strong, and proud. Just the sight of her pulled Herkin back to her mocking words, "You're back to being trash again." His jaw tightened. Yeah, now is not the time to sit around. He turned away from the counter, already thinking of his next move. Back at Herkin's home, the pod was delivered and set up completely by a technician. As the man stepped outside, he turned back and said, "The V-Gear installation is complete. You can start using it immediately. I'll be going now." Herkin stood in front of the machine, staring at it with determination. In his hand, he held a card. He thought, "This is the quickest way for me to earn money." The card read, "Same-day lending, personalized lending, a service for Warlord gamers. Lowest interest rate guaranteed." That's when it became clear. Herkin had taken the V-Gear on an installment plan. He remembered the sketchy man who had handed him the card earlier, saying, 10 million won? Of course we can. But when Herkin had reached for the card, the man had drawn a knife and stabbed it right through the center, warning, "If you can't pay us back, your life's going to become hell." Now, gripping that card tightly, Herkin thought, "Whatever. I'll fall into hellfire if I have to." He climbed into the pod, pulled the helmet on, and leaned back. The screen lit up with a flickering glow, displaying the message, "Connecting." His eyes narrowed. If it meant I could get those bastards good, I'll risk everything. He shouted, "Connect." The system responded, identifying user. "Welcome to Warlord." He spawned back into the game and looked up at the sky, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. It's been a while, he thought. She should be showing up soon. What was her name again? Ari? Just then, a dazzling figure descended in front of him, surrounded by golden light. A beautiful girl landed gracefully on the ground. Her presence was almost divine. She smiled and said, "Congratulations on completing the tutorial. I'm Ariadne, here to guide you on your journey." He nodded to himself, remembering now her name was Ariadne. She continued, "Now, adventurer, it's time to choose your basic class. There are 3 available paths. The skills you develop now will shape the class you become. First is the warrior. Brave frontline fighters who use melee weapons. If you're seeking intense battles, this class is ideal." He thought for a moment. I leveled this class up easily in my past life. But as the game progresses, solo play becomes a nightmare. He shook his head. "No thanks." She moved on. Then there's the cleric. They use sacred powers to heal and support allies. He didn't hesitate. Not a chance. I'm not here to babysit anyone. Ari smirked. That only leaves one option then. I hope your adventure is as thrilling as you wish. Golden energy began to swirl around her hands. She pressed her palms together and directed that energy toward Hirkin. His body lit up, wrapped in glowing yellow threads of energy. A notification appeared before him. You have selected a basic class. Transferring to the corresponding class tower. Hirkin appeared in a vast chamber illuminated by moonlight streaming through a glass ceiling. The pale glow cast its light onto a mysterious figure floating in midair, an elderly man seated cross-legged atop a massive book. Shelves of ancient tomes surrounded the space, their presence radiating the weight of centuries of knowledge. The old man slowly opened his eyes and smiled warmly. "Welcome, seeker of wisdom. I am Golko, guardian of the arcane path. Tell me, what branch of magic calls to your soul?" Before he could continue, Hirkin stepped forward and answered firmly. "Dark magic." Golko blinked, caught off guard. "Pardon me? Did you say dirt magic? Earth magic, perhaps? My ears aren't what they used to be." Hirkin interrupted again, his voice calm but resolute. "I said dark magic. That's what I want to learn." Golko's expression turned grim. "Where did you hear of such a thing? That path is dangerous. Dark magic can devour the user from the inside. It corrupts everything it touches." Hirkin met his eyes without hesitation. "I know exactly what it does. That's why I need it. Inside, he thought, this is the only power that can give me what I need. It has to be dark magic." Golko remained silent, troubled. His hands trembled as he stroked his beard, then slowly, with a shudder, pressed a finger into his own cheek. His skin tore like paper, peeling away to reveal the bone beneath. A skeletal form emerged, cloaked in shadows. The room grew cold. The moonlight vanished, replaced by an oppressive violet haze, as dark energy pulsed through the air. Golko chuckled darkly, saying, "It's been quite some time since a brat dared to walk this path. If you're serious, place your hand on that skill book. But heed my warning, this fate isn't meant for the faint-hearted. Most fools break long before they see true power." With a flick of his bony fingers, Golko passed the ancient tome toward Hirkin. But before Golko could say more, Hirkin placed his hand on the book without hesitation. "Let's not waste time. I'm not like the others." A surge of energy burst from the book. Swirls of violet and deep purple light wrapped around Hirkin's body, as if the very shadows embraced him. A sinister laugh echoed from the darkness, its tone almost gleeful. "What a fascinating one you are. It's been too long since someone like you arrived." In his mind, Hirkin recalled a famous video from his past life, a lone necromancer who had single-handedly defeated a raid boss. That was the kind of strength he needed now. Power like that, that's what I'm after. His fist clenched as arcs of blue energy sparked through his hand, his eyes glowing with a deep violet hue. A notification appeared in front of him. You have become a necromancer. Skill acquired, skeleton fragment. Hirkin blinked, then scoffed. Skeleton fragment? He opened his palm to find a small skull, no bigger than a child's toy, resting there. Without hesitation, he dropped it to the ground. The tiny skull bounced once. A new notification flashed before Hirkin's eyes. Skeleton warrior consumes mana to maintain its form. He watched closely as the small skull began to absorb his mana, little by little. Wisps of blue light flowed from his body into the fragment, and the skeleton began to take shape again: spine, ribs, arms, legs. Within seconds, a full skeleton stood before him, its bones glowing faintly, and bright blue energy flaring from its eye sockets like twin flames. Herkin smirked, impressed. Good. Now to level up. Where's the nearest training dungeon? But just as he was about to act, the skeleton suddenly dropped to the ground with a hollow clatter. The skull rolled toward his foot and stopped. He stared at it, confused. What just happened? Herkin entered the beginner-level dungeon known as the training dungeon. Earlier, when the skeleton's head had dropped to the ground, the skeleton calmly picked it back up and placed it onto its shoulders, and both of them had shared a brief moment of confusion. Now, recalling that moment, Herkin thought, this doesn't feel like the sluggish skeletons I remember from my past life. What's going on with this one? He opened the skill window and checked the stats of the skeleton warrior. The prophecy level was marked as F. Herkin narrowed his eyes. So it's an F grade because my prophecy stat is low? I need to level up fast. Just then, a low growl echoed through the stone corridor behind him. He turned his head sharply. That sound, right on cue. 3 coal wolves stepped out of the shadows, their glowing eyes locked onto him. Herkin grinned. Coal wolves. Not too powerful, but fast enough to test combat performance. Perfect. He activated the skill, Skeleton Fragment. Blue energy crackled in his hand as the familiar skull appeared. With a focused breath, he commanded, "Go forth." He hurled the skull forward. As it hit the ground, it absorbed mana and quickly reassembled into a full skeleton warrior. A notification blinked in front of him. Skeleton warrior detects an enemy. Entering combat stance. The coal wolves growled low, their stance tense as they caught sight of the skeleton. Something about it made them hesitate, ears twitching in caution. Herkin smirked. He pointed toward the wolves and commanded with confidence, "Skeleton, finish them." The skeleton warrior charged forward, its bony limbs rattling as it dashed. The wolves responded immediately, sprinting straight at it. Herkin watched with interest, thinking, not bad. It's faster and more aggressive than I remember. If it keeps this up, I might hit max level faster than expected. One of the wolves leapt into the air, baring its fangs. The skeleton raised its arms to counter, then, suddenly, it exploded into scattered bones. The impact was too much. The entire skeleton burst apart like a brittle toy. Herkin's confidence vanished in an instant. The skull rolled across the stone floor and came to a stop right in front of him, its hollow sockets facing up like it was pleading for forgiveness. It almost looked ashamed. He sighed, utterly embarrassed. Something's not right. He quickly reopened the skill window. As he scanned through the description, a new detail caught his eye. The 7th creature is equipped with a deep learning system and adapts based on combat experience. Behavior can be modified through the user's default command settings. Herkin stared at the screen as 3 mode options appeared. 1. Defense Mode 2. Attack Mode 3. Special Action Mode. He slapped his forehead. That's why the skeleton's been acting so strange. I didn't even assign a mode. Quickly, he selected Defense Mode. Instantly, the skull's eyes lit up with blue energy. The skeleton reassembled and crouched low in a guarded stance, arms crossed tightly in front of its ribs like a soldier shielding itself from incoming fire. Herkin blinked, confused and embarrassed. Wait, that's Defense Mode? Unsatisfied, he switched to Special Action Mode just to test it. The system responded immediately. Notification: Skeleton Warrior has begun executing Special Action Protocol. The skeleton rose with dramatic flair and suddenly broke into a wild dance. It waved its arms erratically, swayed its hips with unsettling rhythm, and spun in place like it was on stage. Herkin took a step back, absolutely mortified. What in the world? What is this thing doing? He covered his face. What the hell is going on with this skeleton? Herkin stood over the downed coal wolf, wiping the sweat off his brow. He managed to defeat those wolves alone. This is insane. That bonehead was no help at all. He tried deleting the character out of frustration, only to be hit with a system message saying character deletion is restricted for accounts younger than 3 months. Great. So I'm stuck with him. He turned and saw the warrior skeleton still twirling and jerking its limbs in that awkward combat dance. Herkin groaned, running his hand through his hair. I can't delete this mess. I can't change classes. My loan payments start next month. Maybe I should just get hit by a car again. Why does nothing ever go my way? Just when I thought my life was turning around, I end up with a dancing bone clown. He shouted toward the skeleton, stay still already, you're driving me insane. He looked back at the skill window in a last attempt to figure things out. Then his eyes landed on one line again. The summoned creature is equipped with a deep learning system and learns from combat. Wait, it learns from watching me? When I fought those wolves, he was copying me? He paused, then glanced at the skeleton again, which was still spinning around like a confused ballerina. It all clicked. That was his attempt at mimicking my moves. That's why he's fighting like that. A grin crept across Herkin's face. All right, now we're getting somewhere. He picked up a stick from the ground and handed it to the skeleton. Here. If you're gonna copy someone, then you better learn from the best. You're lucky to have a master like me. I might not look like much, but I trained an entire guild of rankers. So let's start with lesson 1. If you don't dodge, you die. Without warning, Herkin threw a clean punch straight into the skeleton's skull. The skeleton warrior collapsed to the ground again, but this time, it quickly got back up. Herkin didn't let up. He hit the skeleton again, forcing it to learn faster. Each time the skeleton stood, Herkin kept pushing, correcting, and refining its movements. He shouted, if you get hit, don't just stand there like an idiot. Think of a follow-up. Look for an opening after you dodge, and then strike back. The skeleton stumbled again but stood up with more purpose, as if it were wiping away tears. It seemed to finally understand what Herkin was teaching. He gave a small nod of approval. Good. Now you're getting it. Skeleton turned to face the wolves that had reappeared, rushing toward him. The skeleton warrior, stick in hand, charged forward, ready for action. It moved with a newfound determination, striking at the wolves with calculated, deadly blows. With every hit, the wolves fell, one by one, until all 2 lay defeated. The skeleton paused and turned its head toward Herkin, waiting for a reaction. Herkin scowled playfully. What are you looking at? Didn't I tell you not to get distracted during battle? But I'll admit your moves weren't half bad. A notification flashed on the screen. The prophecy of the skeleton fragment is increasing. A warm, golden light swirled around the skeleton and Herkin, as if the both of them were leveling up. Herkin raised an eyebrow. You pass. The skeleton stood proudly, and for the first time, Herkin felt a small bit of satisfaction from his new creation. At the beginner-level area near Figus Castle, the place was bustling with players buying gear, chatting, and forming teams. Herkin stood in the middle of the crowd, listening to the noise around him. Someone shouted, guild members wanted, looking for players who are like family. Another voice called out, forming a raid party for Forest Spider. Herkin smirked, thinking the skeleton was actually worth teaching. With a few more days of solid grinding, I'll be able to clear the whole training dungeon solo. Now the real challenge begins. First things first, I need to hit level 10. As he walked through the crowd, lost in thought, he bumped into someone without realizing. A voice snapped from behind, hey, shouldn't you at least apologize when you bumped into someone? Herkin turned slightly, only to see a stocky man glaring at him. The guy was huge, looked like some third-rate thug, and had already grabbed Herkin's shoulder with a firm grip. Herkin stared at the hand on his shoulder, thinking, does every second I waste have to be like this? Should I just end this guy? The man barked again. What kind of jerk just walks through people like that? Then he pulled back his fist to punch. But before he could throw the punch, a tall figure stepped between them, catching the thug's fist midair. The newcomer was towering, his golden short hair shining under the sun. He gave a relaxed smile and said, just because someone brushes past you doesn't mean you get to swing at them, mister. The thug squinted and said, who the hell are you? You with this guy? The tall man paused and then said, not exactly. Herkin's eyes widened. He stared at the golden-haired guy, jaw clenched. This guy, don't tell me, he can't be. The man in the loud Hawaiian shirt, his yellow hair catching the light, stepped in and calmly told the thug, no need to jump to fists, man. The thug snapped back, who even are you? You with this guy? Yellow hair tilted his head, thinking for a moment before casually replying, not really. Behind him, Herkin narrowed his eyes, studying the man. Those overbuilt muscles, that ridiculous fashion sense, no doubt about it. That's Mathadov Shev, the top-ranked warrior from my past life. But what the hell is he doing here? Herkin called out wait, but before he could say more, the thug cracked his knuckles, voice calm but cold, telling him, if you don't even know the guy, maybe don't get involved. He hit me first. Ever heard of payback? Mathodov chuckled, but the laugh twisted into something darker. In an instant, the air changed. A wave of murderous intent rolled off him, his presence turning heavy and suffocating. His aura flared red, radiating a strange heat that made even Herkin instinctively shield his face. Mathodov smirked and said, since your fist touched my palm, guess I'll have to return the favor. The thug broke into a cold sweat. His buddies behind him whispered nervously, that's Mathodov Shev. He's the guild master of the Red Bulls. One of the top 30 guilds. And he's infamous for loving fights more than anything. That's the killer, Mathodov, the thug stammered. What? Why would someone like him? But Mathodov didn't let him finish. He stepped closer, voice low and heavy, asking, so, what's your answer? The man froze, his back soaked in sweat, then burst out, I'm sorry, and bolted off, shouting apologies as he ran. Mathodov chuckled, watching him flee, then said, glad we could settle that without getting too rough. He turned to Herkin, placing a hand on his shoulder. Hey, you alright? Don't let punks like him bother you. But Herkin shrugged him off, walking ahead without looking back. You don't have to help me next time. Mathodov stood there for a moment, rubbing the back of his neck. Harsh. That guy's got ice in his veins. As Herkin walked off, his thoughts burned. Damn it. I froze just now, overwhelmed by that guy's strength. But next time we cross paths, I'll be a whole different person. Inside the dimly lit cave, Herkin sat quietly, the flickering torchlight casting shadows across the stone walls. His thoughts circled back to the clash from before. He clenched his fists, thinking the gap between us was too wide. Shiru and Shev, they're both monsters. If I really want revenge, I've got to get stronger, way stronger. A deep growl snapped him back to reality. Behind him, a massive beast emerged, snarling and charging straight toward him. But just before it reached, his skeleton warrior leapt in, driving its staff straight into the beast's side and knocking it away. Without missing a beat, the skeleton followed up with precise, rapid strikes, piercing the creature's side again and again. A notification appeared, flashing across Herkin's vision. The skeleton warrior has hunted the cold tiger. Level up! The skeleton turned to Herkin, clearly seeking approval. But Herkin just let out a sigh, saying, 3 days, just to hit level 10. That took longer than I thought. Hearing that, the skeleton drooped, clearly disappointed. Another notification popped up. Congratulations, you have reached level 10. There are no more monsters remaining in the training dungeon. Your beginner symbol has been removed. Reward granted. A warm glow of yellow light wrapped around Herkin's body, marking his advancement. Finally, he muttered under his breath. Around his wrist, the plain device he wore shimmered and shifted into something sleeker, his war watch. He tapped through the interface. Stats tab, quest log, map access, inventory, messaging all unlocked. Looking down at it, he gave a quiet nod. It's been a while since I felt this thrill. Status window. As he spoke, a screen appeared before him, his own profile, his progress laid bare. Herkin looked at his status screen and muttered to himself that his stats had finally been refreshed. The stat points he'd earned could now be used to boost his strength, stamina, intelligence, or mana. He rubbed his chin, deep in thought. This is my first time allocating stat points in this life, better not waste them. Normally, a necromancer would pump them into mana or intelligence. But instead, he grinned and poured all his points into strength. As soon as he confirmed, his body lit up with a golden glow, and a notification confirmed strength increased by 50. His muscles tightened, and his body felt lighter, faster, deadlier. His skeleton warrior, watching from the side, began trembling and dropped to its knees, its sockets spilling spectral tears. Herkin frowned and asked what he was doing. He walked over and flicked the skeleton on the forehead. I'm not giving up on necromancy, you idiot. I'm trying to teach you. He stared at the skeleton, voice steady. Even if I raise mana or intelligence right now, it won't change much. But with more strength, I can pass on all the combat experience I had at my peak. I'm betting my life on how much you'll grow. The skeleton straightened up, clearly moved, its glowing eyes now focused with renewed resolve. But Herkin scoffed, already annoyed again. Enough with the drama. Just focus on your training. There are plenty of ways to balance out the other stats later. At the Writers Association Figus Castle branch, a man dropped a quest card on the board, calling it a fresh and easy opportunity. Instantly, the atmosphere turned chaotic. People lunged for it, shouting to get out of the way, each claiming they'd been waiting since the day before. Amid the crowd, Herkin walked through with a calm expression. Watching the frenzy, he thought the quests available at this hour aren't exactly impressive. Still, everyone seems excited, probably because they're all new. He approached the counter, where an old man sat, and said he was looking to take on a quest too. Could he see the list? The old man nodded and warned him that the remaining quests were pretty tough and not many wanted them. Was he confident? Herkin crouched and began scanning the cards laid out, each one marked with ominous tasks and creepy names. But he grinned, thinking this is exactly where his hidden ace lies. His hand stopped on one quest, and with a smirk, he picked it up. Bima Mountain's Cave. The card showed a lone wolf, and the objective was to wipe out all monsters near Bima Mountain. The reward was just 10 gold. Herkin thought to himself that although it looked like a typical low-level hunt, clearing this particular quest before reaching level 15 would grant him a super rare title prospect. The old man, noticing Herkin's interest, asked if he was serious about that one. It was a low-tier quest barely worth 10 gold. But Herkin had already tapped his watch to accept it. A notification confirmed the new quest had been registered. He thought earning the prospect title would be game-changing. Titles raise your stats, and this one did so by percentage, not just flat points. In other words, it was the perfect way to jumpstart his journey to becoming an overpowered character. With determination, he turned away from the counter and thought it was time to gear up. Now that the quest was set, the real challenge could begin. Herkin finally arrived at Bima Mountain, standing tall and proud, well, as proud as one could look while dressed like a complete fashion disaster. His outfit? A chaotic masterpiece. On his head, a Joker mask grinned menacingly. His pants were bright red, loud enough to scare birds off the trees. On his feet, a pair of worn-out wolf shoes growled silently with every step. A neon blue belt flashed around his waist like a glow stick at a midnight rave, and his sleeves puffed up like 2 angry marshmallows. He looked less like a fearsome necromancer and more like a circus act that had escaped from rehearsal. Still, his confidence was unshaken. He struck a pose at the foot of the mountain, wind dramatically whipping through his puffed sleeves. Then he clenched his jaw, muttering to himself that he just speedrun the whole quest, get it over with, and grabbed some decent clothes before his dignity took any more damage. With a loud battle cry that sounded more like frustration than fury, he charged into the mountain, darting between trees like a man on a mission or someone trying to outrun their fashion choices. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of Bima Forest, a man emerged from the thick grass in the most pitiful state imaginable. His hands were torn up, face bruised. Crawling with what little strength he had left, he raised his voice and begged for help, his words shaky and desperate. A man stepped onto Bima Mountain and raised his arms like a hero at the start of a grand tale. With a smug grin, he declared, finally, I, Multi, begin my real adventure. Feeling proud of himself, he muttered, already level 11. I must be a natural at this. At this rate, I might actually become a ranker. Lost in dreams of glory, he suddenly heard a panicked voice crying out for help. Someone shouted, somebody help! My friend is badly hurt. Please, anyone. Concerned, Multi ran toward the sound and arrived at a scene that shook him. One man was lying on the ground, covered in blood, barely conscious. Another knelt beside him, desperately begging for assistance. Multi froze for a second and then said, What happened here? The man looked up and cried, We were attacked by a monster we've never seen before. We barely made it out alive and we're out of healing points. Please help us. Multi recognized them vaguely, and without a second thought, he said, Hang in there, I'll send you some healing points. He tapped on his watch and transferred the points. The kneeling man's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, Thank you, we won't forget this. You've saved us. But the gratitude was a lie. Behind Multi a shadow rose. A man wielding a hammer-like weapon stepped forward and, without hesitation, swung it down. The blow struck Multi hard, sending him crashing to the ground. His body trembled as he coughed up blood, realization dawning in his eyes. The man who had pretended to beg for help stood up with a smirk and said, Appreciate the donation. We'll make good use of your stuff. Multi gasped, You tricked me. You cowards. The fake victim chuckled, replying, Oh, come on. Don't be so bitter. You just made it too easy. Should have been more careful. A notification echoed player Multi has died. His player watch dropped beside him, gleaming faintly. The three men standing around him burst into laughter. One of them jeered, "Newbies are always the best. They're so trusting, it's adorable." Another added, "Did you see that face when he realized he got duped? Priceless." The third, a man with gray hair, looked at the three watches now in his possession. He didn't smile. Cold and efficient, he simply said, "Let's go find the next one." His name was Ralph. On the other side of the forest, the skeleton warrior stood firm, his sword raised and gleaming as he faced off against a snarling pack of wolves. From behind, Herkin called out sharply, "Attack mode." In an instant, the skeleton's demeanor changed. It charged forward like a beast unleashed, slashing through the wolves with feral precision, tearing through their throats, and slicing them into pieces. One after another, system notifications appeared. Skeleton warrior has hunted ancient tree wolf. Experience gained. As the skeleton carved through the third wolf, Herkin watched with a grin. Now that his minion had a proper weapon, even a group of wolves was no big deal. He smirked to himself, thinking it was definitely the right call to equip the skeleton first. A true gamer values utility over style. Though, deep down, he winced every time he caught a glimpse of his own ridiculous outfit: the jester head, puffed sleeves, neon belt, and those cursed wolf shoes. He was too embarrassed to even acknowledge his reflection. The skeleton warrior gave a subtle glance at Herkin's wardrobe and covered his face as if feeling secondhand shame. His eyes glimmered like a scolded puppy, clearly worried about their shared dignity. Snapping back to the mission, Herkin barked, "What are you daydreaming about? If you're done here, then get moving. We've got grinding to do if we want this place cleared." He marched forward, and the skeleton obediently followed behind. But suddenly, a sharp whistling sound cut through the trees. An arrow flew out from the thick bushes and lodged itself right into the skeleton's skull. Herkin halted mid-step, spun around, and narrowed his eyes. An arrow? In front of Herkin stood Ralph and his shady crew. Ralph raised his hands and smiled nervously, saying it was just a misunderstanding. He thought the skeleton was a monster from a distance. He even rubbed at his eyes, pretending to tear up. Herkin simply nodded and replied calmly, "It's all right." But he wasn't fooled for a second. His eyes scanned their gear. Those weren't rookie weapons, and the red stains weren't from wolves. Not to mention the multiple player watches hanging from their hand like trophies. Herkin chuckled under his breath and said, "Well then, if you really want to make up for it, why don't you hand over a mana potion and we'll call it even?" Skeleton, clearly irritated, yanked the arrow out of his own skull and took a bold step forward, practically vibrating with rage. Ralph glanced at his teammates and said with a smirk, "We don't have any potions on us. But since mana gets replenished when you level up, how about we help you level up right now?" Herkin tilted his head and asked, "You'd do that?" Ralph nodded sweetly, saying, "Of course, it's the least we can do after causing trouble." Just then, the growls of wolves echoed around them. More monsters were closing in. Ralph grinned and said, "Perfect timing. Monsters have arrived. We'll weaken them for you, so just finish them off." Herkin gave a small smile and agreed, "Sounds good." But behind that smile, Ralph had other plans. He leaned toward his team and whispered, "You remember the plan, right?" One of them nodded and said, "Yeah. I'll draw the aggro, throw an attack buff on them, then accidentally send one straight at him. That should do the trick." Just as planned, Ralph and his crew executed their little ambush. A wolf came charging toward Herkin. Herkin let out a fake panic shout, putting on a convincing act. But the moment the dust settled, Ralph and his team stood frozen in disbelief. The wolf lay crumpled on the ground, clearly defeated, while Herkin and Skeleton stood there, completely unharmed. Herkin casually brushed off his sleeves and muttered to his skeleton, "That could have been bad." Then he glared and asked, "Why can't you move faster?" Still playing it cool, he turned back to Ralph and flashed a big thumbs up, saying, "We're doing great, please keep it coming." Ralph clenched his teeth. What the hell? How's his summon this strong? Is his level higher than it looks? Fine, let's overwhelm him. He gave the signal, and more wolves were unleashed, flooding toward Herkin and Skeleton. The plan was simple: wait for Herkin to get busy, then attack from behind. And just as they expected, when Herkin was locked in a clash with the wolves, one of Ralph's men leapt forward from behind, weapon raised high. He smirked midair, thinking it was an easy win. But as he brought the weapon down, his smile vanished. In one smooth motion, Herkin spun around and slashed him across the chest. The attacker hit the ground hard, motionless. Ralph and the last man recoiled in shock, shouting, "What?" Herkin pointed and said sharply, "Skeleton." Without wasting a second, both he and his undead companion charged straight toward Ralph and the last guy. No more games. Ralph and his last teammate screamed, "Let's talk," desperately trying to save themselves. But Herkin and the skeleton didn't slow down. With cold precision, they swung their blades, and both enemies collapsed to the ground dead on impact. Standing over them, Herkin muttered, "I know bastards like you too well. You play the victims, win people's trust, then stab them in the back and take everything. If this was the old me, your trick might have worked." Ralph, still clinging to life, groaned and cried out, "Wait. I'll give you items. I'm sorry. Please. I'm really sorry." But Herkin's eyes were sharp and unwavering. He raised his sword and said, "I don't trust people anymore." With one clean swing, he ended it. Ralph's head fell, and the notification appeared, "Player Ralph has died. 8 ownerless watches have been dropped." Herkin's eyes widened in disbelief. 8? This bastard was on a looting spree. He shook his head, sighing, "Well, since things turned out this way, I might as well make the most of it. First things first, new clothes." Meanwhile, the skeleton was already hammering away at the corpses with unnecessary enthusiasm. Herkin glanced at him, amused, and said, "My precious skeleton, is there anything you'd like for yourself?" The skeleton turned to him with the most heartwarming, emotional look a pile of bones could manage. Herkin gently placed his hand on the skeleton warrior, initiating the upgrade. A soft glow enveloped the bones, and when it faded, a sleek black scarf now wrapped around the skeleton's ribs and neck. Overjoyed, the skeleton raised its sword high in the air with pure excitement. Herkin chuckled, saying, "So you like it that much? Looks may not matter in a game, but hey, sometimes a little flair goes a long way." Herkin himself had finally ditched the humiliating clown outfit. Now, he was clad in a sharp black ensemble, complete with a sleek jacket that screamed power. Admiring his new appearance, he smirked and muttered, "These war watches were an absolute jackpot. Turns out, when you sell another player's war watch, it drops a random item from their inventory, sometimes even rare ones with special attributes." Thanks to that, he'd scored big: a black goblin belt, a sword infused with the essence of the ancient tree, a skill book titled Demon Curse, and a generous stack of gold. He threw his hands up and shouted, "Now this is what I call a real jackpot." As a final touch, he summoned a floating mask that hovered above his palm. He admired it and said, "Sooner than expected. From now on, I'll be recording all my gameplay. Creating a solid identity is crucial." A memory from his past flashed across his mind. He remembered sitting across from a friend who would eventually betray him, back when they had discussed forming a guild. He'd told him, "Building an identity is everything. Just imagine everyone in the guild wearing Haho masks, we'd go viral." His friend had agreed, and that's how the Haho Mask Guild was born. Back in the present, Herkin clenched his fist. He'd once considered going with a new identity, but now he thought, "No. I won't let anyone steal what's mine again." As he upgraded the mask, its form became fiercer, more menacing. He looked at it and said, "I'll use this to prove I was right all along." He pulled the mask over his face and turned to his skeleton. "Let's go." Both of them dashed deeper into the heart of Bime Mountain, weaving through towering stone formations and massive square-shaped cliffs. Nestled between them, a swirling blue vortex shimmered mysteriously. Without hesitation, Herkin and his skeleton plunged through it and entered the Bime Mountain cave dungeon. As their boots hit the rocky ground inside, the air turned damp and chilly. Herkin scanned the dim surroundings and muttered, "I'm pretty sure this is where those blue werewolves show up." He smirked, thinking, "This dungeon isn't exactly beginner-friendly, but with the gear I've got now, I should be able to run it in under 10 minutes. He raised his voice with excitement, "Let's move!" Behind him, the skeleton warrior clutched his sword and charged forward, overflowing with the kind of energy only an upgraded minion could have. Hours passed. The deeper they went, the quieter the cave became. Eventually, they arrived at what looked like the end of a massive stone wall, no sign of an exit or enemy in sight. Herkin snapped, visibly annoyed. "What the hell? Not a single monster? That's impossible. If someone had already cleared this dungeon, the system should have said so. Don't tell me it's bugged." Meanwhile, the skeleton was busy doing his own thing, smacking the wall repeatedly with his sword. Herkin glanced over, irritated. "What are you doing now?" But then he looked closer. The skeleton wasn't just swinging at the stone. It was striking something else, a faint, swirling purple spot on the wall. Curious, Herkin walked over. The moment he reached out and touched it, the vortex expanded violently, knocking him off his feet. A loud chime rang in his ears, followed by a bright system notification. You have discovered an instant dungeon. Would you like to enter the stage? His eyes widened. This wasn't a bug. This was a hidden goldmine. Herkin muttered, no wonder there weren't any monsters. Instant dungeons. They're one-time stages that randomly spawn inside regular dungeons. When one appears, it temporarily disables the normal dungeon until it's cleared. They're tougher, no doubt, but the rewards are leagues better. He paused, eyes narrowing as he remembered what came with that challenge. The catch is, you either clear it, or you die trying. And when you die in this game, you're locked out for 2 days. He stared at the swirling vortex. Rationally speaking, I should walk away. I could just do some other quests, level up more steadily. This isn't the smart choice. But while his head said no, his gut screamed yes. Without another thought, he grabbed the skeleton warrior's bony hand and stepped in. I just have to clear it. The moment they entered, a flash of blinding white light consumed them. Herkin instinctively clenched his eyes shut. When he slowly opened them, the scene had changed completely. They were standing in a massive arena, a giant coliseum with worn stone seating stretching up all around them. It was eerily quiet. The skeleton warrior tilted its skull, sockets scanning their new surroundings in curiosity. Herkin looked around, wary. This is a coliseum, kind of intimidating. He scratched the back of his neck, already feeling the tension build in the air. I wonder what's about to come out. And someone had already appeared. Standing before them was a massive wolf, its fur dark as night, its eyes burning red with fury. In the center of its forehead, a third eye glowed crimson, pulsing like a heartbeat. Herkin froze for a second as the system failed to register its level. His eyes widened. A corrupted werewolf, the beast let out a guttural growl, then launched itself toward Herkin with terrifying speed. Herkin barely had time to react before its claws slammed into him, sending him flying backward and slamming hard into the stone wall. He groaned, embedded in the cracked surface. Skeleton warrior remained untouched. The loyal summon turned, gripped his sword tightly, and stared down the monster with glowing determination. Pinned to the wall, Herkin coughed and muttered that he was too lucky today. He grit his teeth, saying that a corrupted monster was showing up in a place like this, something tied to the mana quest. Pushing himself free, Herkin shouted to Skeleton that if they didn't kill that thing, there would be no dinner tonight. The skeleton warrior let out a rage-filled snarl if bones could growl and charged at the wolf. Just then, Herkin also burst forward. As the skeleton raised its sword mid-attack, Herkin stepped onto the blade and launched himself high into the air. The corrupted werewolf looked up, its 3 eyes locking onto Herkin. Floating midair, Herkin raised his sword and chanted the skill, Inflict Curse, Demon Cursed. Dark energy spiraled around his blade, turning it a violent shade of purple. With a battle cry, he plummeted down and slashed across the beast's shoulder, slicing clean through one of its arms. The werewolf roared in pain, staggering back. A system message flashed, target afflicted. All stats reduced by 10%. Landing with a thud, Herkin grinned and said the demon curse wasn't bad at all for his first time using it. But the corrupted werewolf grew more enraged. It howled, its third eye pulsing violently. The system flashed another message: corrupted werewolf is enraged. All status effects nullified. Herkin's face darkened. He said it wouldn't be an instant dungeon if it were easy. Then, with a smirk, he added that he had been saving this for later, but he might as well try it now. He tapped on his watch and commanded, "Slot on." A blue hue surged from the device, wrapping him in radiant light. Energy swirled around him like a storm. When the glow faded, his black suit had transformed. Sleek lines of blue light ran through the fabric, his aura pulsing with strength. He grinned, ready for war, and said, "All right, let's do this." Slot on, one of Warlord's most unique features. When a player activates Slot on, they temporarily draw power directly from the world of Warlord itself, awakening an enhanced state each unique to the player. Monster users often call it the ultimate mode, the form that reflects the very core of a player's combat style and spirit. Herkin now stood before the corrupted werewolf, his newly transformed form wrapped in streaks of glowing blue energy. Facing the snarling beast, he spoke without fear, "Bring it on." The corrupted werewolf let out a deafening roar and lunged. As it charged, its clawed hand extended, and its sharp nails shot forward like daggers. But Herkin dodged with ease. Each time the claws came, he leaped into the air, twisted his body, or bent low to avoid them entirely. He never stayed still for more than a second, weaving between the assaults like a blur of shadow and light. Even while dodging, his thoughts were sharp. As expected of a boss monster. Its speed, strength, everything is on another level. If it hits me 4 times, no, even 3, it's over. But that's what makes this game so damn fun. With a smirk curling on his lips, Herkin twisted his body midair and slashed his sword down across the werewolf's back. A violent spray of dark red blood erupted as the blade cut deep. The beast howled in pain, reeling forward. But Herkin's smile didn't last long. The werewolf suddenly slammed both its front limbs onto the ground. The force of the impact sent shockwaves through the earth, and the very floor beneath them cracked and rose. Caught off guard, Herkin was launched into the air from the tremor, the ground erupting beneath his feet. The world spun for a second as he lost his footing. Herkin smirked, saying that must have been its enraged state he had totally forgotten. As he twisted midair, he looked down at the beast and shouted, "Hey, aren't you forgetting someone too?" The corrupted werewolf, consumed by its fury and focused solely on Herkin, didn't notice the silent figure looming above. The skeleton warrior descended like a shadow with its blade drawn, and in a swift motion, it severed the wolf's arm. Herkin shouted to his partner that it was time for the move they practiced. The skeleton gave a small nod and turned. Both of them dashed behind the beast, their swords slashing in tandem. The corrupted werewolf, already on the brink of collapse, couldn't handle their combined onslaught. Steel flashed in every direction as they carved through the enemy, and finally, with one last synchronized strike, they sliced the werewolf apart. The notification rang out, deactivating slot on. Herkin's glowing suit dimmed and faded, leaving him back in his original form. He gave a small smirk and said that wasn't bad. With the corrupted werewolf defeated, the quest from Bima Mountain was marked complete. They received 10 gold. Another message popped up: Skeleton Warrior has defeated a very powerful monster. Skeleton Fragment skill has risen to rank E. Herkin obtained the werewolf's skull and hide. The skeleton, overwhelmed with excitement, started dancing with joy. Herkin watched him and laughed, saying instant dungeon rewards really were juicy. Then another notification appeared: he had obtained the necklace of the corrupted tracker. A purple-colored necklace that boosted class-related stats and carried the Chronicle Unique rank. As Herkin inspected it, he muttered that it was a Chronicle Unique. Even if it's untradeable, that's a tier above standard unique items. But then something clicked in his mind. Corrupted tracker? Could it be? Before he could finish his thought, the system message appeared, announcing 3 new titles had been registered to his profile: Promising Rookie, Seeking Challenger of Heroes, and The Last Corrupted Tracker. One by one, Herkin read through the newly acquired titles. He muttered that Promising Rookie was the one he had been aiming for from the start. Then he noticed Challenger of Heroes and nodded, saying it made sense after all, he did clear the instant dungeon solo. But when his eyes landed on the last one, The Last Corrupted Tracker, he froze for a moment, and then it hit him. He said out loud that Corrupted Tracker was the introductory title for the first chapter of the main quest, Count Corruption. A main quest. That meant he had officially stepped into Warlord's core storyline, the foundation of the game's universe. The rewards for main quests were beyond valuable, and every player dreamed of getting involved in them. It was Warlord's flagship content. In his previous life, he barely managed to reach Chapter 4. But now, he had already unlocked the beginning. This wasn't just a stroke of luck. He had truly hit the jackpot. Overwhelmed with excitement, he shouted one word: log out. Back in reality, Herkin stood in front of his computer, watching the news video play. On screen, a man in full armor confidently declared that Hydra Guild was officially entering the final chapter of the Count Corruption scenario, and that their goal was to complete it within 3 months. Herkin froze, then slammed his forehead against the desk in frustration. He shouted that jackpot his foot, someone was already at the final chapter of Count Corruption. If he tried jumping in now, he wouldn't get anything. He groaned, wondering if he should just give up on this round and aim for the next chapter instead. But then a new idea clicked in his mind. Maybe this was actually an opportunity. Right now, the entire Warlord community was obsessed with Count Corruption. If a video related to it were uploaded right now, the views would be insane. He pictured himself rolling in wealth and grinned, relieved that he had recorded all of his gameplay. He reminded himself that editing was the key. He couldn't trust just anyone with that. There was only one person he could rely on, the editing god from his past life, filmmaker Roman. He pulled out his phone and made the call. On the other side, Roman was sitting in her messy room, eating ramen. She glanced at the message that had just come in: Dungeon clear, video editing request, Herkin, level 15. She scoffed and muttered, what kind of amazing footage could a level 15 possibly have? Probably just another spoiled beginner trying to flex on social media. But then she clicked on the video. And froze. She stood up abruptly, eyes locked onto the screen. Then she shouted with fiery excitement she had found it. Her muse. In the office, a woman stood before a large window, holding a tablet in her hand. She looked at it with a gleam of interest. A man hurried toward her, asking if she had called him. She handed him the tablet, her voice steady but focused. A video related to count corruption had just been uploaded. It was interesting. A level 15 had soloed a corrupted werewolf. The man glanced at the screen. After watching for a moment, he frowned and mentioned that their team had already checked it. The corrupted werewolf's level was low, so there was no need to pay attention to it. But the woman's gaze remained sharp, unwavering. She liked it and wanted it. She instructed him to bring it to her. She was Chai Seal Yin, known in Warlord as the Queen of Thunder. Sir,